Hi guys, in this episode of Shri series, we're going to be talking about solving right angle trigonometry questions with the emphasis of using cosine or the cosine ratio. All right, so we've got two questions here. We've got A and we've got B, and we need to work out the value of X here and there. All right, now if you looked at my previous videos, I gave a brief introduction on how we work out trigonometric ratios. We need to find out firstly the three lengths. So in other words, you need to find your opposite, we need to find your adjacent, and you need to find your hypotenuse. So just a bit of a recap. So O for opposite, A for adjacent, and H for hypotenuse. All right, so these are the three lengths that you find in a right angle triangle. All right, and then the last thing that we did before was, in order for you to find the appropriate trigonometric ratio, you need to apply the SOHCAHTOA rule, which in a nutshell is SOH, KAH, and TOA, which basically states that sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cos is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan is opposite over adjacent. All right, so just like any other questions or any other topic, there are basic steps that you need to follow. So when you're solving right angle trigonometry questions, you need to identify what's been given. Is there an opposite, is there an adjacent, or hypotenuse? And then use SOHCAHTOA to work out the appropriate ratio. Okay, now that you've understood the theory, we'll go straight into questions A and B. Okay, so just remember, when we're working on right angle trigonometry, you must remember one thing, that you need to see the sign of a right angle, which is the square there. If you don't see that sign, please don't assume that it's a right angle, even if it may look perpendicular, or you might assume that it's 90 degrees. Always look at the symbol. Okay, so let's look at A. What information we've got? We've got an angle which is 28 degrees. We've got 7 and we've got X. So we need to identify what lengths have been given. All right, so we know very well 7 is my hypotenuse because that's the longest side of a right angle triangle. We now need to identify what X is. All right, now we have two choices. Is it either the opposite or is it the adjacent? Okay, now if it's opposite, it would have to be in that direction, but it's not opposite. All right, so that is your opposite, and X here becomes your adjacent. Okay, so what ratio has adjacent and hypotenuse? That is cosine. All right, so what we do there is we write down the formula. So cos theta is A over H. Okay, and next we now need to substitute, which is, I'll use a different color, cos 28 degrees. All right, 28 degrees is X over H, because the trigonometric ratio is cos is A over H. Now, if you remember from the previous video, when you're told to find the numerator, you just have to multiply. All right, now if you see there's an H here, there's an H there, so what I need to do now is, in place of H, I'm going to put 7. So X is going to be 7 cos 28 degrees. All right, now this question requires me to use a calculator, so all I need to do is literally enter 7 cos 28, and my answer is 6.18. all right, so that's 6.18. Now if that is meters, we stick to meters because we need to be consistent with the unit. All right, so that is 6.18 meters. So what do? We identify what is my hypotenuse, which is 7, X, which is adjacent, and we use cosine. Write your formula and then substitute. So in place of theta, you put 28. In place of H, you put 7. And because we're trying to work out the numerator, you cross multiply. So 7 times cos 28. And if you're unsure, work it out again until you get the same answer. I've done it twice, so it's 6.18 meters. All right, so that's how you work out A. Now let's look at B. Okay, we've got a side which is 11. All right, so let's say 11 meters, and we've got to find x. All right, now if you look at x, is that the opposite, is that the adjacent, or is that the hypotenuse? That is h, because the h is the longest side, or your hypotenuse is the longest side in this right angle triangle. And what is 11? Is that opposite or adjacent? That is adjacent. All right, now that's opposite, but we're not solving for that. We're not solving for that. Sorry, I need to put an O there. So that's opposite. We're not solving for that. We're solving for A here. Great. So we need to find out again what ratio links adjacent over hypotenuse. Just like A, it's cosine. So we write down the formula. Cos theta is A over h, and the next thing we need to do is substitute. So what do we do there? We got cos 35 degrees is 11 over x. All right, now if you remember here, the unknown that we're trying to work out, which is your hypotenuse, is your denominator. All right, so if you compare that with that, you'll actually see the x was your numerator and you needed to multiply, whereas here it's your denominator, so you need to divide. So that therefore becomes, I'll just use a different color, x equals 11 over cos 35 degrees. All right, so x is 11 divided by cos 35. So you get your calculator and go 11 divided by cos 35, and that is 13.43. So x becomes 13.43 meters. All right, and if you're not sure, work it out again. 11 divided by cos 35 is 13.43 meters. Now, one thing you can also notice is that because you're trying to we're working out your hypotenuse, and your hypotenuse is the longest side of a right angle triangle. Therefore, the value of x has to be greater than 11. And if you see it's greater than 11, then you've got it correct. Now, if we worked out x and we found out that x was less than 11, then we know there's something wrong, because your hypotenuse is always the largest side of a right angle triangle. If you look at A, for example, you got x, and x is not your hypotenuse, so the value of x has to be less than 7, and that's how you got 6.18. All right, so to summarize this video, you need to identify what length's been given. So if you look at A, we've got 7, which is h, we got x, which is A, and therefore we apply the cosine rule. Always follow the process, always write the formula and show you're working, because like I said before and also in the previous videos, mathematics is not about finding the answer alone, but it's also showing your full and appropriate working and then eventually getting your final answer. All right, so you write down the appropriate trigonometric ratio, which is cos, and then substitute. We ask ourselves, are we solving for the numerator or denominator? If we're solving for the numerator, you multiply. And if you look at B, same process, only difference is we're solving for the denominator. And in this case, we need to divide. All right. In the next set of videos, we'll talk about tan, and then we'll look at how to solve the angle given your length. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening. Bye now.